So this is happening all over the world, that countries are getting together behind our back, essentially, to figure it out. And Bessent gave an interview with CNBC. He was also before Congress and has admitted that we actually haven't spoken to China at all. You know how Trump said we were out there and I've been talking to Xi, and Bessent, and credit to him that he wasn't going to lie about it. He says that that's not true, that we have 18 countries that we're targeting, 17 we've had conversations with, but not with China, which is the main issue here. Mm-hmm. And where he would have had the most support if he had said, I want to reevaluate our China trade policy.
The real fallout from Trump's tariffs are expected to hit Americans soon, in the one place they did not want to be hit, in their own bank accounts, as stockpiles of goods that were holding American consumer prices steady are finally starting to dwindle. Before we get into that, let's hear more from Jessica Tarlov over at Fox News.
And now CEOs are feeling more emboldened to come out and talk about the real risk to their companies and to the American public from these tariffs. Like the Mattel CEO gave a lengthy interview where he talked about the increases in prices of toys, and that we do a lot of our toy making in the creation process here in America, but the manufacturing has to happen in China. Prices will go up. Microsoft says prices of your export.
Because the children's tiny little hands can work on the dolls.
Listen,
don't you care about those children?
I absolutely do care about those children. But the idea that we are going to reroute all of this manufacturing back to America and find little tiny American hands that are going to do it is a farce.
Well, she's absolutely right. Let's make a huge, uncomfortable assumption and just pretend for a second that Trump had good intentions with everything he's done regarding these tariffs since he set foot in the White House. Just for the sake of this conversation, we can go back to not having to pretend in just a minute. But assuming positive intent, the rollout of these tariffs still made no sense. The speed with which he did it, the blanketed way with which he did it, the complete lack of consideration for the people who would be most affected by the fallout. He didn't have any plan in place, nor did he have any way that he was going to provide some kind of soft landing for the people who'd be most affected or for the economy as a whole. He just said, oh, we'll manufacture here. When's that going to happen? Shouldn't a president have at least started to build these manufacturing plants here and started staffing them and started getting them ready for operation before tariffing the entire rest of the planet? He also said, oh, we'll just grow our own stuff here. Really? We're just going to start growing our own coffee beans at such a large scale that we can meet the colossal American demand for it, since we're all just addicted to caffeine now? Countries have literally gone to war for less. And to Gutfeld's point about the Asian children in sweatshops, first of all, he obviously doesn't care about them, but Trump certainly doesn't care about them either. Trump's not doing any of this because he's ethically or morally opposed to Asian children working in sweatshops. All right, so let's hear more from Tarlov.
The executive director of the Port of Los Angeles talked about what's going on there. 35% down in terms of volume. He says truckers are going to be laid off, dock workers are going to be laid off.
Everything.
That's a big deal.
It's always what's going to happen.
And it never happened.
And it never happens. It's not true that it doesn't happen. Prices are already going up. Layoffs at Mac, at their Lehigh plant, 10% of their force. These are real consequences.
The consequences still happen whether or not Fox News chooses to report on them. But even once they do report on them, it doesn't mean that people are going to actually comprehend all of it, take it in, and understand what it means in the real world for real people. I had a Trump supporting woman once tell me during the pandemic that COVID wasn't actually that bad because she personally did not know anyone who had died from it. And this particular woman doesn't talk to anyone on a normal day. She doesn't know that many people. Never mind the numbers that were being reported at the time, including at places like Fox News, from hospitals across the country, detailing exactly how many people had died from it. Those, I guess, to her and others like her, just didn't count. They weren't real. They didn't feel real. And for people like Jeanine Pirro and Jesse Waters, who live and work in Manhattan skyscrapers, probably, I don't know where they live, it's easy for them to not worry about laid off workers in ports that they can't see. And they know that most of their audience doesn't regularly engage with people at the ports either. So they can just say whatever they want and pretend that numbers like 35% loss in shipping volume at the Port of LA aren't going to have real world consequences for real people. So to that point, here is Gene Soroka, the executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, and here's what he had to say about the tariff impact.
According to our own Port Optimizer which measures the loadings in Asia, will be down just a little bit over 35% next week compared to last year. And it's a precipitous drop in volume, with a number of major American retailers stopping all shipments from China based on the tariffs.
Yeah, the China piece of that is the most interesting. That's where the shipments are basically ground to a halt, you've said?
Yes, that's correct. And that makes up about 45% of our business here in Los Angeles, Becky. Now, what we have heard in talking directly to CEOs and senior executives of the shipping lines is they'll try to add a couple of port calls in along the Southeast Asia routes where cargo is still moving, albeit at a 10% tariff. But realistically speaking, until some accord or framework can be reached with China, the volume coming out of there, save a couple of different commodities, will be very light at best.
Meanwhile, MAGA supporters insist that these headlines are overblown. For one, they say that while some ports are less busy, others are more busy, so shipping traffic is simply being redirected. That doesn't hold a ton of water, though, no pun intended, because ports on the West Coast are still receiving ships with less volume of cargo containers. Empty ships mean money is being lost somewhere. When money is lost at any point along the supply chain, the end consumer, that's you, is the one that pays for it. Less volume also means less work, not just for the dock, but also for trucking and shipping and distribution workers and more. And that usually means layoffs. They also say that, yeah, if the goal of the Trump tariffs was to decrease the number of goods Americans are getting from overseas, then it makes sense that there are less shipments coming in now. Possibly, but I don't really think that people who say things like that understand how many things are made at least partially overseas. Even if something was assembled here in the US, at least some of its parts probably came from other countries. To find something that's 100% made in the US, including all of its materials that were also 100% made in the US, is rare. And honestly, it's hard to find companies that claim its products are made in the US and they're not trying to dupe you. That aside, it still doesn't account for the fact that so many things that Americans are used to having come from other countries and cannot be produced in the United States, perhaps most notably coffee and chocolate. And if I'm being honest with you, Yasmin, I don't think that part is necessarily a bad thing. Americans are known overconsumers. We don't know how to be cool about anything. Our overconsumption can and has destroyed nations and ecosystems. Practicing or promoting moderation in this country has been equated with being un-American. You introduce us to quinoa and all of a sudden we're all obsessed. This is why I'm not even mad when people of certain cultures gatekeep their stuff. But Americans are used to paying low prices for things that cost a lot more to produce. And our low prices often means that someone along that chain is not being paid properly for their resources or labor. Someone somewhere is being exploited. Americans also tend to have things like food trends, which never made any sense to me, like the quinoa, but whenever American demand for a product increases, prices for that food tend to increase as well, often to the point that it prices locals out from enjoying foods that are staples of their own cuisine. But let's be very, very clear. Trump is not doing any of this because he's somehow worried about farmers in developing nations. This is just a side effect of his tariffs that I personally am not that mad about. Of course, the same end could have possibly been achieved in other ways without destroying the entire global economy. Finally, they're saying that none of this matters anyway because Trump is about to meet with the Chinese to work out a deal, so we can stop worrying about all of this. That line of thinking assumes that Trump will prevail with these talks, but what if he doesn't? Then what? Everyone over on X is a supply chain expert now, as I'm sure you'd expect, or everyone has a friend who works at a port, but we will see shortly what the fallout is of all of this, if there is any at all. I always find it odd whenever people expect immediate catastrophic impacts whenever something happens with the economy, even though these things always tend to have effects that play out much more slowly and much more subtly over months, if not years. But we, as a people, only understand acute displays of anything, whether good or bad. So if something more sinister lies somewhere beneath the surface, a large portion of our population not only won't notice it's there, but they won't even know to look for it. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.